For our guest speaker today, he is the chairman of Ramp Ver Financials, one of the largest distributors of investment funds in the Philippines. He is an active entrepreneur with companies and endeavors in multiple industries. He is the lead independent director of Ayala Land Logistics Holdings Corporation, independent director of Ayala Land, and National Reinsurance Corporation, all listed companies in the Philippine Stock Exchange. He is the chairman of the Soldivo Funds and also a director of Esquire Financing, G Exchange Inc. or GCash, Seedbox Technologies, Seven Tall Trees Events Management, the Cullinan Group, Mobile Group Incorporated, and many other leading companies in different fields. He is recognized as one of the best business, leadership, finance, marketing, and sales speakers in the country. Our speaker is also a best-selling author, financial advisor, and business mentor. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our guest speaker for today, Mr. Rex Mendoza.
Good afternoon. I don't think we're serving food yet. Good afternoon. I have a question for you. I'd like to start off with this. Do you know the world's hottest luxury market in the world in 2023? The hottest luxury market in the world. Think country, think city. What's number one? What's the hottest? I'm not going to hold on to it. I'm not going to hold you on to it, but I'll give you the answer here. And many of us would probably feel, is that true? As the Philippines was in 2023 the hottest luxury market in the world. This is Santos Knight Frank. This is not Ayala talking. These are global research firms focused on properties in an international scale. And I'm not even going to end with that because I'm going to tell you that in 2024, for the first 2 quarters, the Philippines held on to that number 1 spot, edging out, and this kind of rhymes, Dubai, Mumbai, and Shanghai. Those are the 3 other cities that always controlled property appreciation and growth in the luxury space globally. I'd like to thank you for being here. I'd like to let you know that we're grateful that on a Sunday afternoon, you elect to spend time with us. I'm going to be answering a lot of questions, and I guess many of you are contemplating on decisions you want to execute on, but probably at this time, do not have the right amount of confidence to pursue it. Hopefully, I'm going to be very data-driven with what I'm going to be presenting. I'm going to be culling information and real inputs that are not coming from us, but are coming from very reputable property consultant firms, very important international financial organizations. So let me drill down a few questions that I'll try to answer, just to be a little organized, because I'm not given a lot of time. You're not going to stay with me for 3 hours, are you? Not sure, right? I'm so sure I can even be between you and merienda there. So I'm going to try and make it quick. So to make it orderly, I'm going to try to answer questions. Is it a good time to invest? Knowing that we're in the midst of challenges and difficulties in the global and local market. Is it a good time to invest? If the answer is yes, then what asset class would be good to put money on? What are the vehicles and options? Just in case we need to make an investment, what are those that would be worth considering? And if we're going to be pushing on with it, what will be the main considerations. If ever we think this asset class would be best, what would be the best considerations to evaluate moving forward? Obviously, there are a lot of asset classes. And many of you I know are in stocks and financial services as much as I am as well. But you all know that stocks have underperformed basically in the last 6 to 8 years. And real estate has performed really well. And because Ayala Land Premier invited you here, I'm going to make that proposal right in the start. Louis Glickman says the best investment on earth is earth. Obviously, we are a real estate company, and that's the reason why we actually believe this. But is it gonna hold for the next 5 or 10 years or so? Because we're not making an investment decision just for a year or two. A lot of people think that I'm going to be making a long-term decision, but most of the considerations are the way we feel currently, which kind of needs to get challenged. If you're making a long-term decision, you have to evaluate long-term data. You have to look at where it all boils down to. So basically, why real estate has been a favorite in the Philippines? And you all know this, so I'm going to be quick. But these are the advantages that many people cite. Obviously, it's a tangible asset. It's a physical asset with concrete presence, obviously connecting to security and a sense of ownership. But for the financially adept people, for those who are focused on the financial side of comparisons, real estate gives you options for capital appreciation and passive income with the rentals. On top of that, real estate
I can do
also
100 damage to my
gives
Pokemon
you
on each of my turns.
a conducive living environment, especially as we're talking
Give me the
about
pack.
Ayala Land properties. Most
You have the
of our
pack, you're not
developments
happy. Without the
provide
pack, you're
great
also not
value
happy.
in
So it doesn't
a
know how
positive
pack na
vibe.
lang.
A community where people can have
Give it to me the pack na lang.
a very,
Akin.
very different sense of place
the pack.
and shared aspirations.
Give me the pack, Shodi.
Imagine your children growing up over and above stocks, real estate provides this. I have yet to see an investor in the stock market going home telling kids, let's have a picture with my stock certificate. You don't do that, right? But when you own real estate, it's almost like you can share that with family. It's part of the memories you're gonna, have through time. Maybe you're buying something as an investment now, but eventually you're thinking, this might be useful for my kids sometime in the future. So these are the differences which would make an asset class, a tangible asset class like real estate, very different from a stock or a bond or a mutual fund or a UITF. Leverage. For most part in the Philippines, if you invest in financial services, the money you put there is your investment. In real estate, because you can borrow, or even, as developers give you the opportunity to own without paying. And you see that, I think your friendly property specialists have shown you opportunities to be able to take on property at a 10% down, maybe a payment period that can span now over 5 years or 5 years. That is leverage for you. Because you can already own the property, but but you haven't really paid for it. Like, just straightforward comparison. If I buy Ayala Land shares, I have to pay for those Ayala Land shares. Ayala Land shares go up 25%, I make 25%. Real estate's different. You buy property today, as I always go back to this example. I bought New Valley in 2008 when we launched it. It was 8,000 per square. We didn't exactly pay 8,000 per square. Many of the buyers had terms. Some of them paid 10, some of them paid 20%. By the time the fourth year happened, maybe that was 2012, 2013, the price of New Valley shot up to about 20,000. If you haven't paid the whole package and you only paid 25%, that uptick of 100% is not your uptick because you only paid the fraction of the price. That kind of leverage expands your earning potential. So much so that if it goes up 25%, your yield is 250% because you just paid 10% of it. That's a computation that not a lot of people do because, again, it's a function of how much you doled out, how much you paid. It's not a function of the price because the price becomes irrelevant. That's not the money you shelled out. So in the computation of real return on investment, you have to look at the payment schemes. And that's why a lot of people are sometimes asking, do I pay for cash or do I stretch this out? If you're given the option to stretch it out with zero interest, why not get the free money? You can get that free money. But this is big. And I can tell you, one of my good friends, who is an active trader, one of the biggest brokers in the Philippines in stocks, upon hitting 65, started to buy real estate. And I was really surprised. He wasn't an avid fan of hard assets. And I asked him, all of a sudden, why make that shift from financial instruments, market instruments, now to real estate? Why? You know what he said? Rex, at 65, I'm now thinking about the next generations. If I give them money in one generation, that can be gone. But as we all know, the richest of the richest in the Philippines will always hold in their portfolios a portion of the city center as part of their portfolio. The rich in the Philippines will always own land, majority of them, in the most popular city centers in the Philippines because they're thinking future generations. But I have to address the elephant in the room. I think many of you attended this afternoon because of, you'd like to hear something about this, right? I mean, everything that we see now, people think real estate, there's an oversupply. It's almost like connected directly. The elephant in the room is the oversupply of Philippine real estate that can probably lead to its potential crash. I am not going to avoid that. That is a real discussion. And that's the reason why we have to be a bit more detailed and granular because I don't want to pull your leg and just basically avoid this topic. Because this is a real topic that needs clarification. And why? Because of social media. Right? In the last 3 months, we've seen the birth of a lot of young real estate gurus on TikTok. Okay, that's where it is. I mean, it's not going to be in headlines. It's going to be on TikTok. And this guy, actually not Filipino, he started living in the Philippines in 2013 and he's not here now. He's, as much as he calls himself, an international investor in real estate. Okay? And when we get to ask how many properties there were, it's basically less than 20. So, where does the whole fear come from? It's a lot of details, but you see, in social media, and I know some of you are active, especially in TikTok, the key is to have a hook. You have to have a hook. Because without a hook, people will not watch you. So your headline will have to be very strong. 5.8 years, 75,000 unsold condos, 67,000 unsold condos. So he got all the views. And as one person gets all the views, people follow. So we have more and more real estate gurus in social media, right? And I'll tell you, many of us don't even watch the whole video. Because the headline can be so bad, but at the end of it, they will say, it's a great opportunity now because you can get deals from your developer. That's what they end with. But many of us don't watch till the end, do we? You know, we swipe and watch another one. So we always get the headline. We don't get the details of the conversation. And I will tell you, are these people saying things that are factual? The answer is yes. They're not lying. This comes from real research. This is Lee Chu Consultants research coming up at third quarter of 2024, saying there are 67,600 units of ready for occupancy or RFO units that will take 2.4 years to sell. That's where the oversupply discussion started. And obviously, there's another research firm who came up with the results a bit later. So because it's a bit later, it has to be more exciting, right? So that next one is Colliers, and they said 75,300, and it will take 5.8 years to totally sell. And if you're going to be looking at, you know, inventory, dark blue, light blue would be your take-up, which is like the sold units are going down. The units that are getting introduced into the market would be going up. That is when you come up with a straight line view of how long it will take to sell those units. So it's factual. It comes from real data. But people did not drill down, as I've said, with enough detail and granularity. And that's the reason why I tell a lot of people, you know, that's even superseded by a lot of bad news, right? Global issues regarding, you know, the fires in LA, environmental issues, climate change issues, and then political issues. Trump 2.0 with all the tariffs and our very own Sarah impeachment. So things are drilling down and more bad news are coming up. But as I've said, let's be more data-driven then. Sometimes a change in perspective, it's all it takes to see the light. A change in perspective. Really getting down to all the facts and making sure that we understand. Investing is not about predicting the future. It is understanding what's happening with utmost clarity. Because if you understand what's happening, that's the only time you can have clarity when it comes to opportunities. If you're going to be doing that, you're going to see that the Lee Chu report actually came up with where those units are. So the 67,500 is broken down into the number of RFO units per area. So where's the big number? It's Quezon City with 18,500. Ladies and gentlemen, Quezon City is such a big place. Quezon City is bigger than Singapore. So there is a difference between a condo in the periphery of Novaliches and a condo inside Vertis, which is the CBD of Quezon City today. That is where the Grand Central Station of all the significant rail networks will congregate. That's where it's almost like Grand Central Station of New York. That's going to be between Trinoma and SM North EDSA. If you're within that area, you're not going to be worried about this. But when you push numbers like that and you generalize, it's really scary. Look at that, 3.4 thousand, 1,300 in BGC. That is less than a year's supply. If you're going to focus just on BGC, where we are, you won't see that oversupply. That oversupply is in the Bay Area where the POGOs are gone. That's where you have developments of a certain type. And I'm going to be going into that later. So here, you would know that details actually say another story. And those details actually push the idea that, hey, why are the prices softening up and why aren't the units being sold? Because rentals have gone down. If you're going to be look at Alabang, Ortigas, and Bay Area, the rentals in the Bay Area has gone down 44% from before the pandemic. Big impact of that POGO demise. That is the big impact of POGO. How much of POGO is in Makati and BGC? That's where many of these discussions end. And that's the reason why in Makati, BGC, and generally Taguig, they have rental yields better than before the pandemic now. And if you're going to be looking at Makati, those companies that are refurbishing and reconstructing head offices, they're not dumb, right? Look at BPI, BDO, and Metrobank. They are all redoing their head offices in Makati. They are spending billions in new towers, even in the case of BPO, a campus within Makati. As I've said, I mean, they are astute business people. They're not going to look at the next year or two. They know what's about to happen. And that, ladies and gentlemen, overlaid into the rental yields of the entire Asian region. Things change. This is the Global Property Guide. This is not a local publication. That is the guide that cuts across the region. So, if you're going to be looking at rental yields, yes, on the average, we've gone down. But we're still number 4 in a list of 15. See, the problem with the Filipino is this. You got a rental yield of about 7 to 8%. It dropped to 5 point something. You hate it. But you don't know that, hey, the global adjustment has happened. It's not just us. And if I'm showing these numbers, look at that. Who beats the Philippines? Kazakhstan, Georgia, Cambodia. You want to buy properties there for rental? That's who beats us. And in that particular area, maybe quality vis-a-vis return, you have to know how to put your bets in there. Furthermore, again, going back to that Leachu report, I'm not even skipping this. It comes with the entire deal. It comes with the entire package. What is David saying? Leachu is saying that demand is stabilized, but the launches have been muted. Real estate companies know that there is excess supply. They will not launch new projects if they know they're going to be losing out on money because they cannot sell those units. But we're also not dumb either. In the Ayala Land portfolio, where are the launches coming from right now? I see smiles with our PSS at ALP. Why? Because the launches are coming from Ayala Land Premier and Alveo, where the glut is not actually visible. Look at where the supply is. See, the problem about this, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that a lot of launches happened before the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, guess what happened to all of that construction? They all got delayed. And they're all being delivered now. Sabay-sabay. So obviously, you will have that kind of supply. You will have to be able to sell that. And I'll tell you this quite straight, 5.8 years, 2.8 years are the numbers that they said. I am a director of Ayala Land. And this is public knowledge. We have shared it to the media. Our inventory is 18 months, and that includes Avida and Amaya. Just by that, you would know that most probably, ALP and Alveo numbers are going to be strikingly low. But let's not stop there. Let's look at prices. Look at how the prices would have moved. The reason why rental yields have dropped in Alabang, in Ortigas, and in the Bay Area is because prices have also moved up so much in those areas. It's always a function of a numerator and a denominator. If you're going to be looking at yields, it's always a ratio. The prices went up. So obviously, the ratio goes down because the price is the denominator. Does that make sense? Any accountant here who can probably back me up on that one? But you might say, oh, too expensive now, Rex. Really, really expensive. Again, we go back to that Asia-wide view. Property Guide 2025, fresh out of the bakery. That is a January number. Out of the list of the same 15 places, in terms of pricing, we're number 12. So we think we are expensive. But the entire world thinks otherwise. And that's the reason why we have a lot of Middle East buyers, US buyers, and Singaporean buyers. Sometimes the growth rate of those buyers are higher than the Filipino buyers. Because they don't look at social media, ladies and gentlemen. They don't look at what's viral. Like when Sarah's impeachment got viral, can you just imagine what happened to the stock exchange? Is there a direct impact on the performance of the companies fundamentally? The answer is no. But is there an impact with the price? Of course. It's always a supply and demand thing. All the factors that drive residential demand are all up. GDP, OFW remittances, BPO revenue, tourism receipts. Our tourism receipts up by 33%. BPOs have hit 38 billion. Do you know how much that was in the year 2000? BPO revenue was basically $900 million. It's now 38 billion. That is an entire industry giving you the dollars. And people are saying, oh, that's dangerous because AI is coming in. You think AI will operate by itself? There will always be people necessary. Again, the drive is to get ourselves into higher value work. There is no discussion there. We need higher value work, but we're still gonna get this growth, and people are even saying, oh, Trump 2.0, Rex. Mr. Trump will keep the jobs in the U.S. Mr. Trump is a businessman. You want the U.S. companies to really do well, they have to be competitive globally. And to be competitive globally, they have to be competitive price-wise. And to be able to be competitive price-wise, they have to get low-value labor cheaper than what they will spend in the U.S. That's a given. And that is why Trump 2.0 actually was a signal that people have forgotten Trump 1.0. We've watched this movie already. Did Trump say that before? The answer is yes. What happened afterwards? The BPOs grew. So, on top of this, people are going to say, oh, strategic infrastructure. What supports real estate growth? What supports appreciation? It's actually infrastructure. And we're going to be having MRT-7, MRT-3. I've mentioned the Grand Central Station. I've mentioned the subway, which not a lot of people know. The subway is more than 50% complete now. It's on schedule to open at 2029. Those are the things that we should be talking about, right? Not Maris Racal, not Rico Blanco. You know, if I'll tell, I'm in retail as well. I know what became viral in 2024, what the Filipino is watching. I tell a lot of people, how can you have hope when what we consume is all hatred? Right? I mean, that's what's happening. People miss out on this. A road network in Luzon, and this is going to startle you, road network in Luzon with a spine system that will make Bicol to Ilocos 9 hours instead of 20. From 20 hours to 9. I think you all see that now. When I was going to Clark, Baguio, or anywhere in the north, my travel time for Makati is plus 1.5 hours. That's only EDSA. That's only EDSA. Anything is plus 1.5 hours. Now with the Skyway running at around 60 kilometers per hour, that becomes 18 minutes. I always time myself. 18 minutes plus or minus 3. That's how great it is. But when all of these things come to fore, 2028 and 2029, how much will real estate be? By that time, you won't see the glut that people are talking about today. By that time, everyone's going to be confident. By that time, all deals are out. By that time, it will become, again, a seller's market where pricing and deals are going to be off the table. As I've said, I'm a financial advisor, and I get all of the reports from analysts. I can show a lot, but I probably will have time to show only one, and that's the reason why I decided to show Atram, because Atram is the #1 fund manager today. In terms of the fund management space, UITFs and funds, they're #1. What are they saying? A lot of numbers here, but what are they saying? We missed the 6% in 2024. It was a forecast of 6%. It became 5.8. But what are we expecting for 2025? 6.4 and 7. Okay? With an exchange rate that would probably be muted as well. It's not going to go beyond 60 because we have the muscle, we have the foreign exchange reserves that we need to defend our currency. And as far as Atram is concerned, we're in a Goldilocks situation. We are fundamentally in a recovery mode. Where the negatives can be what? Maybe debt to GDP? That's scary. But let's look at it in the perspective of the world. This is the global economy. That's advanced. This is emerging and developing markets. Where is the Philippines? Where are we? Emerging. So what are we saying? The global economy is flat. The big economies are going to be having an uptick because of these protectionist measures. There can be a bit of a slide in emerging and developing economies, but they are still double the growth of the advanced economies. And as we make this even more granular with continents, you will see where the problem really is. The US and the Euro area. Again, where's the Philippines? Emerging and developing Asia, right? And emerging and developing Asia will lead Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa. But again, drive it to a global perspective. Where is the growth coming from? We missed 6%. We were 5.8. That's still 20% of the third placer in this growth chart. We have to probably take a look at what are the real numbers. Because the real issue that we have, ladies and gentlemen, is confidence. The real issue that we have is emotion. Look at the ADB projection for GDP growth. Atram was at 6.4. ADB is at 6.2. We're going to lead Vietnam, Cambodia, and Indonesia. And as I've said, again, worries with GDP growth is debt. I give you the world's highest debt to GDP ratios in terms of countries. We're not even in the top 43, so I had to call and make sure that we have the Asian numbers on this side. We're at 56. And we're so worried about that where we're really using it to be a negative narrative for our economy. Debt is good when it's used for the right purposes. I agree with you. If debt is going to be used for ayuda, it's going to be used for elections, that is quite a negative. But if you're going to tell me that that is going to be a big, big worry today because we can get to be at the doldrums of where these countries are, we're really very, very far from it. According to Center for Economics and Business Research, that's a UK company, and this is published by the Business World, we're going to be the world's 27th largest economy in 2037. A movement of 11 notches in 12 years. An uptick of 11 notches or places in 12 years. I don't know where are we at that time, but maybe in 2028, 2029, we're going to be having a better foothold than what we have today. That's the economy. Let's again drill down on that oversupply. Where does it come from? Now, we segment the market. And this will show you that premium, which includes both luxury and upscale, only comprise 5% of the RFO inventory. See, that's the problem with people who are not drilling down on the data. When we say oversupply, it's almost like oversupply for the whole of Metro Manila, oversupply for all locations, oversupply for all developers, and oversupply for all brands. That's not the way to do this. If you're going to be looking at affordable, economic, and upper middle income, that's where your 81% is. Upscale and luxury only comprise 5% of the BPO inventory. And that's the reason why we are launching projects. That's the reason why supply has to be uptick, so to speak. Now, sorry for the very light blue that you're going to see, but what this means is that for the entire market, the launches were only 19% of the entire pie in 2023. Last year, the launches for premium was hiked up to 55% because middle-income housing, almost no launches. The launches in that market were only what we call follow-throughs or sequels within a business district. But in terms of real launches, it came from premium, which is luxury and upscale markets. So overall, what am I saying? My thesis is that the investor's chief problem and even his worst enemy is likely to be himself. That's quoted by Benjamin Graham. He's the teacher of Warren Buffett, revered as the best investor globally. And while oversupply is the elephant in the room, this is another elephant in the room that I'd want to take out. And it's always a trump card that I will never miss. Because I was the head of sales, marketing, and training here at Ayala Land over 10 years ago. We drive the idea that we are a different developer, we have great brands, and we stand for every project that we come up with. We are the largest, most diversified property developer in the country. we have brands that address each and every market segment, except for social housing. If you're going to be looking at where Ayala Land Premier is, that's your luxury brand. But you will never hear luxury at Ayala Land. You know why? Because genuine luxury is not pretentious. We don't even use that. What do? We tell people, we're the biggest maker of all of these large-scale integrated mixed-use communities. We're not about single pocket developments. We change landscapes all across the country. Makati CBD, Ayala Alabang, Cebu Business Park, BGC, New Valley. You've seen that track record. And as you drill down on the brand, that's what we say. These are spaces of distinction where memories are for keeps. That is real luxury. To be frank about it, the oversupply is not an Ali problem. As I've said, we have 18 months for all of our 5 brands. You can just imagine what number there is for ALP, and that's the reason why I said we're launching new projects this year. So strong brand value, consistently built over time, is the best guarantee of future earnings. These are built-up values over time. And if you're going to go back to all the crises we've been through, 1990s, 97, year 2000, that's 2008. This was a long run. The drop that we see now in the cycle is 2020 to 2024, precipitated by COVID, and it lasts until today. In the 1980s, it was 1983-84 when Ninoy got shot. You know, we're so worried about an inflation rate of 6 to 8% this time. Like we somehow get so upset by it. In 1984, the Philippine inflation rate was 50%. 50. And on October 1984, our inflation rate was 60%. If you bought a property at that time, how much will that property be today? If you have a time capsule and can go back in 2008, where you can buy Serendra at less than 80,000 per square meter, you would have executed on it, right? Because there is a crisis today and you cannot buy anything close to that anymore within BGC. My good friend Winston Garcia, who was the head of GSIS, told me one thing that struck me, and it stayed there for the whole time. You know what he said? Rex, the problem with stocks is that when you make a mistake, that mistake can haunt you forever. Especially if you buy companies that fold up, companies that are not well managed, brands that actually fall off. In real estate, I buy a good developer and a good project in a great location. I can make a mistake, but time will always correct that. Time will always have its way of correcting that. And for ALP, I think I will be showing you a slide that can actually be, in a way, also mind-boggling. We have to learn from lessons of the past. There are so many times when this has happened, and many of us actually brush it aside and maybe not take on the lesson. But history will always repeat itself for people who have never learned that lesson. The lesson that will make us change the way we deal with opportunities. There are connections between fear and opportunities. Where there is fear, there's an opportunity. But when there is great fear, there's a great opportunity as well. I mentioned Trump. This was Trump 1.0. Trump got elected, markets went down. We believed him. America first, all the BPOs will be jumped. From that time, and 3 years after that, where did the market go? As I've said, this is Trump 1.0. And I would say, if things are the way they are, this is going to be probably how the market will react over time as well. This was a PSEI from January 27 to Feb 5. There were a lot of people who got so scared with that move and bailed out in this area, only to find out in a few days that the market's going to recover, and it has recovered ever since. But those are charts that are scary. Let me give you a chart. It's actually been very consistent from 1960. These are prices of Ayala developed projects in 1960. Forbes Park, 200 pesos per square meter in 1968. If you go down 1966, it was 60 pesos per square. Dasma, 156 pesos per square meter. Below 100 in 1966. You overlay everything that has happened to the Philippines. All-time inflation, all-time lending rates, dot-com bubble, Asian financial crisis, SARS, COVID. Overlay all that. Those people who stayed in these villages accorded their families the best living environment this country has ever known. The friends that they had within that community, who they played with, are of the same growth aspirations and vibe that only a conducive environment can provide. Today, many of them are empty nesters. They are selling these properties to move to a smaller condo because their kids are on their own. And what prices do they get? Today, 675 to 750,000 per square meter. After you enjoy the property, after you accorded your family that environment, you get a compounded annual growth rate of 16 to 18%. Give me a fund manager who will do that in 60 years. Not even Warren Buffett did that. But these properties have done that for their owners. It's a choice, ladies and gentlemen. I really want to be hard-hitting here because, I myself got into this. I mean, people know me. There were deals as well that I pounced upon. But I always believe this. I'm in funds, and I heed words of people like Sir John Templeton. Bull markets are born on pessimism. They grow on skepticism. They mature on optimism, they die on euphoria. What does that mean? As an investor, we always have to be ahead of the curve. If we're going to be brave when others are brave, then yields are not going to be the same. Profits are not going to be the same. Clearly, we have to know that there is a basis for this, and it has been going. Every 10 years, we are provided opportunities like this. And I hope all of you will talk to the property specialist that invited you today and would make that decision for yourself and your family as well. Maraming salamat po, and good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you so much, Sir Rex, for that very insightful presentation. We would like to open the floor now for any questions, if we have any questions here. I believe we have questions in our chat box already. We have a few questions in our chat box.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation and the insights. I just have a question. You mentioned that the Ayala Premier now has a lot of new launch. Am I right?
We will be launching projects this year as well. I think that some of your property specialists would have talked to you somehow about them, and they would be good, very good options.
So will this continue like new launches, or is it like plateauing?
We will continue depending on how our sales trajectory will be. The good thing about what we do at Ayala is to make sure that we don't launch another project if a project will still be maybe around 50, 60% bought. So it's always going to be a function of how a project does. But we're not going to be launching arbitrarily when we have projects that have not moved over time.
Yeah, so it's important to know when to kind of slow down or stop.
Yes.
Otherwise, you'll oversupply.
Yes.
So another question is, every year, Ayala tends to increase the price and hold the price of their products, especially for new buyers. Is that something that Ayala will still maintain, given that if the market kind of softens? Because once you drop the price, then there might be a sentiment that everything is falling apart.
Yeah.
So what's the, directive or policy of Ayala on that?
That's a great question, sir. That's very, very important. And that's the reason why we take that, our response to developments like that, very seriously. Because we want to protect our past buyers. We'd like to be able to protect them. But on top of that, let me also cite the fact that new launches will always take into account new costs. So the price of steel, the price of glass, cement, all of these are going up anyway. So if you're going to be maintaining even your margins, it's really going to be an uphill climb when it comes to pricing. However, we also would like to make sure that if we have projects in inventory, that we can hold on to them and not sell them at a bargain like some developers will do. Can you just imagine if you bought a unit for, like, let's say 15 million and you realize somebody's buying it at 12, right? You're obviously going to feel bad about it. So what we do is that we hold on to our units as much as possible on the inventory. We're not going to sell it down. And if ever we do, let me be very clear, for some of our projects in Avida and Amaya, we did that, but we offered it within the Ayala family. This is not going to be offered in public. We were doing that because it's Ayala's 190th year, and it's also a particular anniversary for Ali, which is actually 35. So what we did was a 1.9% discount and a 3.5%, which is basically still below what the discounts are for some companies that are doing 30, 20%. So for us, it's just because of family members, and it's more because of milestones in our company. But we never offer that to the public. We'd like to be able to keep values firm.
When you say family members, you mean employees?
Yes, BPI, Globe.
Employees.
Yeah, employees.
So you think that policy will hold, like, in the next few years to maintain or increase at least the selling price for new launches?
Yeah. For sure, sir, because right now, we don't have the inventory already. We're now down to, even for Amaya and Avida, we're down to 18 months.
Do you also consider the occupancy? Because there are some investor who buys it and tries to rent it out and can't rent it out. Sometimes they bought it at, pre-selling, and then they'll just unload it at ridiculously, below market. As a buyer, then you'll say, hey, I should have just not buy from Ayala and wait for somebody else to sell. How do you address that if you do?
We have done many measures. One of it, you'll be excited to know, we're also launching our own leasing organization. So what we're doing now is make sure that we have a centralized company to also drive, a face to the market for all projects where buyers can actually turn in their properties and will lease it for them. So if people are getting a hard time leasing them out on their own, we'll probably have a central unit that can also help them offer it to the market. So these are little way of being able to help out many of our buyers, because again, especially those that are OFWs. Sometimes, once a tenant leaves, they don't have a ready tenant to come in. We have to have an organization to replace that. So a central depository of all the potential leasing units can really help, because we have the markets. People call us directly.
So is that up already or just in the making?
It's actually up, sir. It's under APMC. See, that's the nice part about Ayala Land. We have all of these companies, like our own construction company, which is by far the biggest construction company in the Philippines. It's called MDC. But on the property management side, we also have APMC, which we actually call the trump card of our property development projects. And that's property management because they're the ones within the building. So they will also be the one on the ground to make sure that the leases can also happen.
I guess my last input is that the Ayala Land would still always monitor the occupancy. It's not just, oh, I sold it, I'm done, next project.
Yeah.
You know, because at some point there's a tipping point where you can't rent it out.
Yeah.
Then what? People will start dumping it, especially if they bought it at an early price.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are very serious about it, and that's the reason why, again, a matter of pride that we tell people, like, if you see Ayala Land projects, no matter what happens to the markets, we do take care of our facilities. Again, case in point will be the Salcedo area. If you're going to be in the Salcedo area, think about 1 Salcedo, 2 Salcedo, 3 Salcedo, Regency. All of those were the first condos we did in Makati. They're the first ones, okay? If you visit those projects, visit those residences, they even look better than competing condos within the area that were introduced to the market decades after. Right? I'm not going to name names, but you know projects within the area that actually look old, they're run down, because again, it's property management and the leasing side that they weren't able to control. We'd like to be able to help our buyers control, and that's going to be part of the service, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your questions.
Do we still have any other questions here in our audience? Okay.
Sir Rex, we have some questions from, I'm here, sir. I'm here at the back. We have questions from our online chat. So there is one client who is actually, the concern is buying between a secondary market and a pre-selling. Because, you know, it's always, I guess, a concern for property specialists that we offer off the plan or pre-selling, and then they are being offered a secondary market, which is like maybe 30% below the current marketplace. So how do you actually like help our clients here to make the decision as to which is a better deal, secondary market or a pre-selling project?
There are going to be pros and cons all the time when you compare secondary and primary. The big advantage of secondary might be price, because people are probably needing the money and they'd like to be able to, you know, cash in on the property. They might also have bought this as a much lower price years ago. So even at minus 30%, they're still pocketing gains. So basically, pricing is an issue. But for some buyer, it will always be important to put a computation on total cost. Because on pre-sale, you can stretch your payment terms at no interest. So you can use the money, right? And make sure that you can lever, you know, other purchases and probably other positions, other financial services products that you can use while you haven't paid for the project. Like let's say you put a 10, 20% down, you pay another 10 to 20% over 5 years. See, at the end of 5 years, you own the property, but you only have paid less than 50% of it. So you have used your money, unlike buying secondary, where you're probably going to cuff out the entire price. So there is a discount rate that equates it and makes it equalized. Okay, so again, for me, the property specialist will have to be able to make that computation of effective cost and IRR, but there is a cost of money that has to be computed there. Now, the thing that I know, outside the financial side to it, is that maganda sa pre-sale, you can have choices of projects. See, in secondary, what's being sold is the only option you have, right? In pre-sale, you can choose like what's close to the park, a corner lot, you know, stuff like that, because you almost have a blank canvas to buy from. So that's another plus for me. Now, but let me share with you, because again, close to my heart, because I've seen this happen in my own experience, no? I probably would have bought more because of the leverage. And as I have said earlier, we bought from New Valley, right? And probably at that time, I was new in the game, not really that confident, so I bought one, right? My friends who are in this game, who are in real estate, they bought 5 to 10 units, all on 10% down payments, okay? All on 10% down payments. 10-10-80, 10-20, 10-20-70, okay? That was 2008. By 2012, they were already selling half of that portfolio, which virtually made the balance, which would be another 2 or 3 portfolios, free. But then again, that's risk-taking for you. As I've said, I wasn't experienced at that time, but we learn, right? So that's a strategy that you can use when you go for the pre-sale side.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for shedding the light on that. And there's another question regarding the differentiation in terms of investing in a lot or a condo. What are your thoughts? Is it better actually to invest in a condo, which is going to obviously generate rental yields, or is it better to just invest in lot and like wait for it to grow and just flip it after like maybe 10 years? So what are your thoughts?
To disclose it properly, I do have both. I have positions in vacant lots, and I also have condos, right? I buy the condos for rental yields. I focus on cash flows because the lots will not have any cash flows. But again, something that probably a lot of people might frown upon, but I do buy lots for my children. Because to be frank about it, I cannot imagine if they can afford buying their homes when they actually get married. Many of us, when we got married, 5-6 years after working, you can afford a property, right? Imagine the way the prices are for our kids. Will they be able to afford property after working for 10 years? I don't think so. So, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm doing my own preparation. It's going to be for them. If they want to build on it, fine. If they don't, it's their property to dispose of. So, as far as I'm concerned, I need a holder of value. I've seen this in fixed income instruments. I've seen this in stocks. And sometimes the experience has been a mixed bag, right? So I'm also doing real estate on the same fashion. I mean, doing it for the people I love.
Okay, thank you, Sir Rex. And I think we have a few more questions.
Hi, Sir Rex. So we have a question here from one of our clients in the webinar. How would you address yet another elephant, which would be the geopolitical risk, specifically the tensions between the United States and China?
Okay. I always get to make sure that we encapsulate the situation for all of us. No? And that's the reason why, maybe let's look at the geopolitical that's international first. China, the US, a potential war, right? Now, you're making an investment, there is a potential war. You think they're really going to be connected? Whether you make that investment or not, when the war happens, you still have to address where you're going to be, right? And that's the reason why some people, like, they go to Dubai, they go to Spain right now, they have golden visas. That would be their option, right? Quite frankly, if there's a world war, you're better off in a province. No one will take, it's not going to be a target, right? If you're going to be in one little island in Bataan, who cares about you? Right? If you just really want that, see, I drive home that kind of a discussion because quite frankly, I don't connect. Because when a war happens, all of the things that you hold, whether those are stocks, that's bonds, they're also going to be down. They're also, that's a pervasive problem, right? Sometimes we get to think about those considerations and it kind of holds us back. Then what do? Nothing. In which case, what's going to hit you? Inflation. And inflation hits everyone else. So, sometimes, I have a good friend, Edward Lee, And he's always going to say, you know, there's so many considerations out of life, and sometimes we all mix them together, whether or not they're actually connected.
We're now going back to our audience for any questions. Okay, we have another question here at the back.
Hello, good afternoon, Sir Rex. I have like kind of two questions. For New Valley, like I enjoy looking at Google Maps, the satellite images and stuff, and also like not just that, like the postings and stuff like that. So right there are there's Avida, Alveo, and ALP. I noticed that so far it seems that the Goldilocks range, where there are a lot of houses being built, is kind of Alveo, and maybe to some markets Avida, like Trevilla and Venare. Then there's some, even if they're Avida, like they're not too shabby, meaning like the Ridge, what is the Ridgeview and Settings, which is also very near Trevilla and School Xavier, right? So do you think, but if you look at the ALP, very few of them have maybe more than 10% of houses built or something like that. So do you see any turning point where the demand to actually live in something higher market like ALP would mature, meaning there's real demand to build a house there? And secondly, kind of not exactly related, but maybe in a way parallel, because I was looking a lot at properties in 2021, like on the secondary market, and I noticed West Grove. That time there were still quite a lot, or meaning not too few, that were selling for like 20,000 per square, 25. Kapag Matarik, sometimes 18,000. Pero 2021, 22, 23, asking prices kind of sometimes doubled or something like that. 22, 23, mga ano na, 45,000. These days, it's not uncommon to see 60,000. Parang bottom is 45,000 asking price now in West Grove. So I guess that had something to do with the pandemic and being in a more livable place. So there, it seems suddenly there was a revolution in demand to buy or build houses in such a place. So yeah, they're not exactly related, but maybe somewhat related, those two questions.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. They are actually related. Our experience is exactly that what happens when you see a high-end residential subdivision. No? There are going to be a few first movers, and then it's going to stop. So the first movers probably will be the first 20 or the first 30 homes. And then every year, you're going to be adding another 10 or 20. Every year. It's very much unlike Alveo and Avida. You're correct. Alveo and Avida, at the get-go, it's going to be 50, 60%. That's Avida. Alveo would probably be 20, 25, but before 3 or 4 years, like Trevea, you will see. I mean, they're almost like houses on all of the lots, right? So, in high-end real estate, the first movers happen, and the trajectory is going to be slow, right? Once it hits a sensitive number, and then for us, that's actually 50%, it's going to be fast. You will see that in, like, let's say a place like West Grove and Greenfields now. Like, you look at the number of houses in Greenfields. There's so much, but about 10, 15 years ago, Greenfields was already up about another 15 years before that. Very slow, right? We started with a golf course, and then the clubhouse. Once those were done, and people started playing golf, you will see adoption. You will see people moving there, it started with the retirees, right? Now with the transport, avenues better, you can now see even Makati-based workers living in Greenfields and West Grove as well, with Calax. No? You will see nice houses, a great place with the numbers. You don't see that yet in Nuvali. And let me tell you, the drivers of that will be Solinad. There's a big mall being done by SM. Right? Okay. That and a Rockwell development that's also going to be beside it. And because of that, we will have to respond. So we have Solinad 1, Solinad 2, and now we're going to be coming up with Solinad 3, which will give the size of SM a run for its money. So you can just imagine, when all of these come forth, and you now have a good population in Xavier and a good population in LaSalle, then the numbers are going to come up. But let me tell you, it's always the high end who will be the last movers. And why? Because most of them, when they came in, they were investors. They didn't really buy to use. They bought maybe for their children. I'm investing here. Maybe in the future when I retire. Now you realize the people in West Grove, they're not retirees. They're actually working in Makati or Ortigas, but they still live in West Grove. For them, the travel time is worth it because they like living there. They're having that trade-off, so to speak. That's the other development that we see now. Thanks, Rolly. People now put up homes in West Grove and they work from home. They'll probably go to Makati twice a week, 3 times a week, and they're basically working from home. And again, I tell everyone, I put my money where my mouth is. I have a house in Abrio. And I'm probably not going to be ashamed of it. I'm like the number 3 house there. Number 3. So, I don't exactly live there. I still live in Makati. But it's still a great place to be in for weekends when I do some golf in the area. And who knows? That can be probably for one of my children when they grow up. I actually want to lease it out. My kids don't want to lease it out. Because they're not footing the bill for the maintenance, right? It's me. So.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I think there's a dilemma here because as a company, Ayala is probably mandated to grow. And if you start adding inventory to the premium segment, especially in that area, Ciela and all that. So a lot of these properties are bought for investments. And most likely the people who bought these houses already are living somewhere, maybe Alabang or somewhere, right? So it'll take a long time for that to be used. So it's just vacant. And then if you keep opening new developments, so there's really an oversupply going after the same basket of buyers. So parang my point there is, the dilemma is with the organization also. But if you start, for you to reach that probably target and say we're the biggest and all that, you have to keep developing and selling land so the inventory is going up. But actually the buying capacity of that market, which is let's say the premier market, is not may or may not be growing as fast as your development. So how do you balance that? Because what will happen is people will invest, you won't actually build. That's why the other developments, it might be their first house. So when they buy, they immediately build. But a lot of these premier, they just buy and leave it there. And then when you want to sell, the other people who bought during pre-selling will sell it cheaper. And then you have a new development left and right opening. So there's a lot of inventory. How do you fix that? Because as an investor also, you want to make sure that the supply is also somewhat limited. Otherwise, it's not really premier because it's available everywhere. So how do you address that?
Okay. I guess the crux will lie in one of the things you said, is that does this market have the capacity to continue buying? Does this market have the capacity to continue investing? And does that match big numbers when it comes to population, which we also do as studies. we're probably not going to be building just for the growth, because at the end of the day, we'll pay for that. We'll pay for that growth, because if a subdivision is vacant, you can just imagine people are not going to be willing to pay for the dues. And to make it a high-level community, we will have to foot that bill. So we're also going to be constrained not to overdo this. But again, for me, just a generalized view, I can probably share, more, let's just say, drill down numbers. But just imagine, we're 120 million Filipinos now. Okay? So if we're going to say, conservatively, 10 people per family. So how many families do we have? No, if it's 10, it's going to be 12 million families. Okay? 12 million families, and a very conservative assumption of 10 people per family. We have less on average, right? So surely we have more than 12 million families. So your luxury market is 1% of the 12 million. 1%, right? So what's 1% of 12 million? 120,000. The high-end residential subdivisions of Metro Manila, Corinthian Gardens, Bel Air, Makati, Dasma, Forbes, you go all the way to Corinthian, you go all the way to Ayala Heights, that's just 21,000. So 21,000 versus the 120 that you will serve. Plus, that 120 will now have children getting married, wanting their own high-end luxury subdivision. So you will see the reason why the prices are the way they are in Dasma and Forbes is because people want to stay in Makati. What's our problem? Transportation network. Given, if I tell you that the drive from Makati to, like, let's say, New Valley will cut in 30 minutes, don't you think a lot of people will live there? So it's actually a matchup between strategic infrastructure, population growth, that will take us to where we want to go. Because the reason why the prices are like this in Metro Manila is because the option to live out is a big trade-off. However, if you look at, again, the question of the West Groves of the world, like how many people live in West Grove now? There are over 300 houses in West Grove already, right? So people will get to that, honestly, right? So even Ayala's doing that now. Now, again, to drive home the point, sir, we launched ERA. How many units were for the first batch of ERA? How many? 150. How many LOIs did we get? Over 200. That's why. I mean, answering your point, will the rich still be able to buy? They are buying. They are. Now, it's our job to make it, and let me tell you, sir, what we're doing. Now, we're packed. I mean, this is spilling the beans. It's too much. I'm a director of Ali. I'm disclosing certain things. Well, anyway, kill me. Okay? And I think some PSS know this. For some subdivisions today, we put up money so that you can be first mover to build a house. So for some subdivisions that we want a build-up, we'll tell you, your furniture package will be on us. We'll give you 10M to build. So may gastos na ganun. But that's what you do to seed. You seed markets, right? And on top of seeding markets, again, I don't know if your PSS tell you, that overpass and that terminal in Arca South will be happening, right? So people are contemplating on Arca South. Game changes are going to happen within the next few months, right? That, what do you call that? Skyway interchange is going to get down at Arca South. Ramonang has already signed that, okay? So it's already approved. We approved it at the board, right? The mall will open this year, by December or first quarter of next year. So there would be an Ayala Malls in Arca South. That will be another game changer. The Bonifacio High Street that you see in BGC, that's going to be in Arca South as well. With an anchor of the Blue Leaf. I think all of you would have had a party in Blue Leaf one way or another. There would be a Blue Leaf in the Bonifacio High Street of Arca South. That will change the game for Arca South. And that will change the game in terms of prices too. So definitely that would be a balancing act. If we want to wait for the development, we can. But obviously the prices will be there because the first movers will always have their cake in terms of being first mover because they take most of the risk, right? I hope I answered your question, sir, but it is what it is, right? I mean, that's exactly how things are.
I believe Maurice, Phil, we have a question from our chat box.
Hello. So we have another question, sir. This is in relation to the other questions before. So this is a specific project question which would be Ayala Greenfield. Why is it not like following the prices of other Ayala projects?
Why isn't it following the prices of Ayala
Yes,
projects?
the increase.
Because it doesn't have what the Ayala projects have. If you notice, Greenfields is just one ALP project. While it was mentioned earlier, you have an Alveo and you have a Trevea in Nuvali, that brings forth market activity. There would be economics within the area. In Greenfields, it's all high-end. And the main anchor will always be the golf course. But not a lot of people play golf, right? However, as I say that, and I think some of you know it, we're going to be putting up a mall in Greenfields. And we've started to open that avenue. If you notice, you can now go to Los Baños passing by Greenfields. We didn't allow that before. And why are we doing that? So that the crowd will start, you know, making it a practice to pass that area. And once a mall is put up in there, you will now have the regular traffic that you're going to have for the mall. So that is planned. You know, urban planning is done in a very circuitous way, but there are data scientists for that. Basically, they contend with all of these, you know, traffic issues, foot traffic issues, especially with commercial and malls in the area.
We have a room for one more question. Last question. No more? If we don't have any more questions, we would like to thank Sir Rex for his very insightful presentation. This is our token of appreciation for you, Sir Rex. And please stay. Feel free to stay, everyone, if you would like to still continue your discussion with your property specialist. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.